you showed up on the stage at TED Talk wearing flip-flops, and you had talked about how, I think it was your wife, right? Said, you can't do that. People are saying, what are you doing? Like, no one does that. No one does all these things, and you're pushing these limits, but it's like, this is who you are. And you're not going to apologize for it. And maybe there was a time when you would have apologized for it, or you would have gone somewhere else with it, some darker place, and tried to pretend that you're something that you're not, and that you're out there doing it. And I think it relates, it's different, right? Because that's just standing out, it's putting yourself out there. But I also see it a lot now with, like you mentioned, the election or whatever it is. There's opinions that are assigned to people. And that's super frustrating, right? Because you must feel this way about something. And perhaps it's because of the mask that you wear. I don't know. I don't know how to correlate the two, but I think there's that as well. And that leads to, and the person themselves might not even really, they haven't even got an introspective on it to know that what is their true opinion on this, as opposed to the opinion being assigned to them. And there's so much happening in there. And it can be frustrating for people. And I think it can create anger. It can create people just to, you know what, I'm just not going to say anything at all. Did you see that? Do you see where I'm kind of going with that?
Yeah. And one thing that you said, how you get assigned and then you're scared of what people will think. I think it's really important for us to understand that in the last 25 years, everything around how we interact has completely changed. And, I'm not a professor, but like, just here's some street attic logic for you. We are more connected through technology than we've ever been, and less connected prior to the pandemic with the people in our lives than we've ever been, right? Nuclear families are blown up. We don't have the village anymore, all that kind of stuff. So the problem is that human beings are scared of two deaths. We're scared of physical death and social death. And when you really think of it, they're combined, because on our own, like a tiger would kick our ass. Like we're not beating a tiger. It's going to kick our ass. So we have to work together. So you have to be part of a tribe in order to survive. That's how humans become an apex predator while being some of the physically most weak beings in the world. So if we don't have a tribe that we are completely tight with, the whole world potentially becomes our tribe. And with digital interaction through social media and internet, suddenly a negative comment can threaten my safety. And so as proud as I was of my TED Talk, and say as grateful as I was that it went viral and that people responded to it, all it took was one negative comment for me to kind of go through a downward spiral a little bit. People love the flip-flops, but all it took was one guy going, what a D-bag wearing flip-flops. And I'm like, oh, shouldn't have worn the flip. My wife was right. And there's like 20 more comments that say that they think that's awesome. I want to tell you that I don't look at this stuff, but I do. Mm-hmm. The most liked comment was like, you can tell this man's authentic. He's wearing flip-flops. And it's got like, I don't know, it had like 3,000 likes or something like that. But I'm paying attention to some dude that's hiding behind a computer saying he shouldn't have worn flip-flops. Eventually, I stopped paying attention to it. But I just think that we have more hostile threats to our authentic selves than we've ever had, because we don't have the reinforcement of those tight nuclear family kind of reinforcing bonds of like, be you, be your unique self, all that kind of stuff. But we have access to literally the entire world's level of criticism. And so it's really hard to counteract that voice that says, you're not allowed to have a unique perspective.
Yeah. It's super vulnerable because you just admitted that, hey, I look at these comments.
Oh, I totally want to be the guys like, I don't look at them, but I do.
Yeah. And of course, it takes a while, right, to build that up. And kids are dealing with it. I mean, you have a son now, right? I mean, he's going to go to school. There's going to be bullies. There's going to be haters. There's going to be times when the people are even not even trying. They're just a comment in passing can lead to someone feeling really bad about themselves. And how do they handle it? I mean, it's every single day. I have 3 kids, right? You see it constantly. That vulnerability is super important to then be able to talk about it, right? Because, and I don't know what the studies are, and we can go find one, but for every bad comment, you need like 10 good comments to feel a little bit better. And that's just unbelievable that just one bad comment in passing could just send you off the rails. And who knows where that person's even coming from and what they're dealing with, right? And it's significant. And again, going back to that, you had that line, it's still happening. And you're living through that right now. You had to go to a place though, and you had to go to hear Jordan Peterson talk. He talks a lot about the belly of the beast, and you talk about the movie Pinocchio, right? He had to go down to the belly of the beast. You had to go to these dark places. And it's something I'm always fascinated by, because I don't think anyone's just made perfect decisions along their path. They had to go back, and maybe they weren't bad decisions in the past, but they're still living through it. You are who you are today because of all that you went through. And obviously you probably felt like you wronged people or did some things that you obviously would never have wanted to do. But did you had to go there to be who you are today?
100%.
Like, how do you look at that? Yeah.
So 100%. And one of the things that I do is I can live in the philosophical realm, but the philosophy of, hey man, you should just not use drugs didn't get me clean. I need philosophy to be backed up by practical, tactical execution that's effortless, right? And that's why I love a 12-step program and it changed my life. And so when people say everything that you did prepares you for this moment, and so you should be grateful for everything that happened, like that sounds really good. But if you've done some heinous stuff in your life, if you have some incredible shame over who you've been or the way you've acted or what you've done, that doesn't really carry the water. It doesn't. And so for me, I had to actually like use my principles and use my program in recovery and say, okay, so like, what do I really mean when I say I'm glad that I'm an addict? And so like, I had to go back and actually think about it and break it down into something that's practical that can tell every addict in this world that they are a fucking superpower and just waiting to happen. And it was me being able to isolate two things. And so before I tell you the two things, when I go and I speak to companies or whatever, one of the things I'll tell them is the best thing about me is that I'm an addict. And when I say that, I'm not saying that I'm grateful for my recovery. When I'm doing my gratitude in the morning and I'm talking to my higher power, I tell him that I'm grateful for my disease of addiction before I ever start talking to him about my recovery. And that's because my addiction gave me two things that most people don't have. Number one, it gave me incentive. I walk around, even to this day with 18 years clean, with a loaded gun pointed at my head that says, if you don't practice the principles that I talk about in my TED Talk or in my book or that I was taught in recovery, if I don't practice those principles, I die. And as a result, I have a greater incentive than the average leader to practice rigorous authenticity, to surrender the outcome, and to do uncomfortable work. I have to, or I die. Number two, because that incentive is an incentive that largely at least half of our world is impacted by. Most people are impacted by addiction. There's a lot of really great resources and communities out there. And so for me as an addict, I can go to a 12-step meeting anywhere in the world, especially now with Zoom. I can literally go like anywhere. And for the price of 1 hour of my time and a really shitty cup of coffee, I can be around people that are literally like in a boot camp for training on how to use these principles. I can get my 10,000 hours practicing these the way a Navy SEAL prepares for battle, all with people that share the same incentive. And so as a result, I have a place to learn and I have the incentive to go there in a way that most people don't have. And so when I coach people that aren't addicts, I usually have to find, which is where we started, the things that are like addiction for them, that they may not have my dark story, but everybody's got that part of them that they think is the worst thing about them. And these three principles are about answering the question, what if the worst thing about you could become the best thing about you? And I have the incentive and the opportunity to use the principles to make that happen. And as a result, I had to make amends. I had to own all the things that I did. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade any of it.
In case you haven't noticed, we love podcasts. In fact, yeah, you should have one. We'll even build it for you. A podcast, that is. Simply email me at eric@sportse.io. We'll get your podcast published fast.